I know it always seems so long, right? The last few minutes right before we get started.
Well, truth be told, Dr. Myra, you and I don't usually sit quietly.
That is also true. All right, I'll leave it to you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Management Q's webinar series on the art of effective management. Today's session will provide a snapshot into the 5 functions of leadership. I'm Marisa Stoltzfus, your HROD executive expert, bringing you more than 25 years of experience, and I have the privilege of hosting this webinar series. Being an effective manager requires you to step into leadership assertively. Having identified the right work to address, leadership takes performance to a whole new level with relational skills that engage and inspire. Whether you're leading a small team or an entire organization, the concepts of leadership are critical to get the best performance from each individual. This series is designed to share bits of knowledge, some tips, and a few tools that will help you navigate the complexities of management, enhance your team's performance, and drive organizational success. While the Art of Effective Management series is not a comprehensive training program, we will explore various functions of management, a few effective communication strategies, and some very key decision-making points to inspire you and help you nurture a positive workplace culture. For today, we'll explore a more comprehensive approach to management while giving you a few key takeaways to apply right away on the 5 functions of leadership. We value your insights and questions, so feel free to participate actively in the chat box. Now, here's Dr. Myra Austin, CEO and founder of Management Q's, to walk us through today's management topic. Dr. Myra?
Thank you, Marisa. Happy morning to everybody and happy Women's History Month. Definitely a cause for celebration. So per usual, we start off with compliance first, just to make sure everybody's on the same page. This Management Q's webinar series is intended for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon in reaching a conclusion over any employment area of law. And what that means is we share examples, experiences, best practices. Yes, we talk about some legislation at times, but by no means is it actual legal guidance for your specific situation. So if you ever come across anything that you think points in the direction of something that you're experiencing, you can absolutely start your discovery process with what you're learning here, but please make sure that you escalate it to your HR leader or to legal counsel as necessary. Okay, now that we've been past that, let's get into some of the fun stuff here. So both Marisa and I have a little bit over 2 decades of experience in our given areas, and I have really specialized in areas of management and operations. And so I've led teams, I've scaled companies over the past 20 and some years. And so my experience really comes from that, in addition to my educational background and training. And for Marisa, in the same way, she's been operating as an HR executive and leader for over 2 decades as well. So as you're participating on this webinar, please ask any questions that you might have related to the topic that we're talking about today, the webinar series, and everything in between. Okay, we love the feedback. This is a safe zone for sure. We try to make it that way. So feel free to collaborate and participate. Okay. So for today, what we're going to do is we're going to give you an overview of leadership in relation to management. All of our sessions in this webinar series are bite-sized for everybody so that they're easy to digest. We're efficient with your time and we're quick, but you're taking something valuable away. So we'll go through takeaways, we'll go through some resources and open it up for any questions that you might have or comments, and then we'll hand it back over to Marisa to do her phenomenal closeout. Okay. All right, here we go. So leadership, when we think about leadership in terms of in the workforce, it could be confusing sometimes based on the behaviors that we see in the workplace and based on maybe some practices that haven't been executed correctly, or you know, when you partner with junior managers or leadership, you can have the wrong impression of what leadership is. And so we want to start by breaking it down into simple terms and really understanding what leadership is. So leadership is a verb, it's not a noun, meaning, you know, when you think about a manager, that's a noun. When you think about a leader, it's something different. Leadership means you act when necessary. That's what leadership really means. Leadership is moving beyond your job function. It's an action that you take. Leadership is determined by your proactiveness, your influence, and your capability. And we're going to talk about what that means in application. But in my experience, when I'm moving through the workforce, I oftentimes will see the misrepresentation of what leadership is. Marisa has so much experience working with different roles, different job descriptions, executives, managers, up and coming management newcomers. Marisa, what would you say is a big misconception that you see when it comes to leadership in the workplace?
Yeah, one of the biggest misconceptions that I experience is one of the previous topics that we covered, which is about the function of control, right? Leadership is not about control. Leadership is about enabling others. It's about coaching, developing, bringing the best out of people through processes of discovery and questioning. And so, when I think about the concept, the function of control and the misconceptions there, I think they relate to the misconceptions of leadership.
Oh, I agree. And so if you haven't had a chance to check out our prior sessions in the webinar series, feel free to email us and request them. We have them so we can share them with you. But it's really important to understand the fundamentals that make up both leadership and management, because it's only in partnership that you really become effective, when you really understand how leadership is supposed to work with management and vice versa. Okay. So here's what management and leadership in the workplace really mean. So in the workplace, managers have a platform in which to lead. So if you're a manager, yes, you have additional responsibility. Yes, you're setting the example. Yes, you have these other things that are components of your role. And so in essence, you're given a platform in which to lead. But this doesn't mean that only managers or executives should be leading. Anybody can be a leader, because it's a verb, it's an action, it's a way of being. It's something that you do when it needs to be done. That's what leadership is. And so it's not tied to a title or a role. And that's the other misconception, that sometimes team members will hesitate to be leaders because they think they shouldn't be a leader until they have a certain title. And that's just not true. And so team members who hold managerial and executive positions do have a responsibility to step into leadership assertively. So what that means is typically the aspect of leadership that they're supposed to be realizing in an environment is usually outlined in a job description. And so they have a higher degree of responsibility, which is different from leadership only belonging to them, right? That's not how it's supposed to be. So leadership requirements are typically outlined in these job descriptions, and then executive leadership, or the highest party that holds them accountable, looks for these traits, looks for these things to make sure that they're exercised in the workplace. So this ties back to defining the roles that we play, but also the culture that we create in an environment. If you don't see people stepping into their leadership in every role, it's usually a sign that culture isn't promoting that. So Marisa, this is a big you section, right? As an HR executive and professional on the call, when it comes to the difference between these roles, how they play out, and the kind of culture that we create, what is your feedback on that side?
Well, it really does start at the top of the organization, right? Leaders at the top of the organization present the example. They provide the behaviors that others look up to. One thing about leadership, if you don't think this is true, I'm here to tell you it is true. People are always watching you. They are always looking to see what you're doing. They notice when you leave your office how often your door is closed, whether or not you're talking to people, whether or not you're reprimanding. And one of the cues to know whether or not there's good leadership happening in the organization is when you get invited to go talk to a leader, and the first thing somebody says is, "Uh-oh, what did I do?" Right? So like that's
Yeah.
a key, that's a clue, man. So leadership is just something that we have to work very hard on. Anyone, as Myra said, can be a leader. And it is something that is really critical to managers in terms of stepping into your own style of leadership, as opposed to watching and mimicking others who may not be the best example.
Oh, such a great comment there. So we each have our, what I like to call our brand, right? And so when I'm coaching and when I'm directing and managing other managers, one of the things that I always say to them is, what is your brand? What is your brand of management? What is your brand of leadership? Because you're representing something, whether you want to or not. So dialing into whether you know what that is and you can summarize it is a great exercise for managers out there, because it's what you're putting out there. And that's in spite of whatever is around you. So yes, let's keep going and discover leadership a little bit deeper. So now that we talked about leadership a bit, we're going to start diving into what leadership looks like, because sometimes that's why we can't tell the difference between certain things being a management function or a leadership function. It's because we merge them and assume that they're one. So this quote to me stands out because I think it's a good starting point, and management is doing things right. So if you have been participating in our webinar series, we've talked about the functions that really make up effective management. So doing those things right is mastering those functions. Leadership, however, is doing the right things. So leadership is really stepping in when you need to, speaking up when you should, advocating for your team members, making sure we're not treating people differently in the environment, making sure we don't just say we have an open door policy. It feels like an open door policy, and people are, really, really invited to participate. So this quote is from Peter Drucker. And I have to tell you, I have my management heroes because I'm so passionate about management. And the reason I'm so passionate about it is because I feel that it's been largely misrepresented in the workplace and throughout literature and marketing and all of these different arenas. Peter Drucker, if you don't know anything about him, he really was the first pioneer that focused on management as an important function of business in the workplace. And so he is phenomenal. If you look up any books that he's written, I suggest that you do, at least through my doctorate journey. I focused a lot on Peter Drucker, and he was a leader of development of management education, and he invented the concept known as management by objectives. So if you're a manager and you just want to get a feel for how important management by itself is, he's a great resource for you to look into. So we're going to dive into leadership today, but I wanted to point out the distinction that Peter Drucker made, because that's how you know whether you're being a leader or whether you're being a manager in any given scenario. So leadership has 5 functions, okay, that make up leadership. And those 5 functions are influencing, motivating, inspiring, creating, and mentoring. Okay, so if we're being leaders, we're balanced across these areas. And of course, this takes discipline to do. But as you can tell, this is the softer side of what happens in the workplace. It requires emotional intelligence, which we'll be talking about in a bit. And it really encompasses understanding people as people. Leadership is about mobilizing people, but also understanding where they're at, caring about where they're going, and joining that with the functions of management that create effective operations and business. And so it's a partnership that has to be created. Before I move on, Marisa, do you have anything to mention when it comes to these 5 functions?
One thing, these 5 functions are about meeting people where they are and bringing them along. Everybody is at a different place, which makes leadership so challenging. But when you get to know your people, right, this is all about building the relationship that you have with the people that report to you and the people that you report to. So that's it. That's my ad.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal ad. And so she always hides these little nuggets in what she says, right? So for us to make sure nobody misses it, she also said relationship up, right? It's common for managers to have a relationship with the team that they're managing, but it's difficult a lot of the times for them to establish relationship with the people they report to, or the people that are around them and leading other departments. We see a lot of silos in the work that we do with management team members who disconnect from everybody except their group. And so leadership, stepping into your leadership, means you're connected with everybody in the organization in a way that serves the whole versus just one department.
Before we move on, I think this is a really critical point because Dr. Myra talks about this in her training. When she's working with the team, she talks about how the management team is a team as well. So not only are you supporting the people that report to you and you're supporting the people that you report to, but you're also developing relationships with the people that are your colleagues, right? And that concept is, I think it's lost in a lot of businesses where managers don't see the relevance of the relationships across the team, right? Across the management team. I think it's a really important aspect and something that makes management cues very unique.
Thank you. Thank you, Marisa. Yeah. And I think, this is the bottom line is, as people, we all connect and communicate and feel acknowledged and accepted and part of something when these aspects of leadership are happening. And so when they're not, what ends up happening, and we'll talk about failures in a bit, but you end up creating silos, you end up discriminating people, you end up retaliating, whether intentionally or unintentionally. And it happens because of the culture you've created. So let's keep going here because I know we're brief on these webinar series. So the comparison, just to give you a breakdown to make it easier, this is what it looks like to do the same thing, but from a leadership perspective and from a management perspective. And if you follow us on social, we have a lot of these kind of nuggets along the way. So when we're looking at leadership, leaders are setting the vision. They're telling people what the picture looks like. And the managers are the management manager in you is following the vision. You're making sure the vision happens, right? So those are the distinguishing factors there. Leadership, think of ideas, right? The leadership in you is thinking of ideas. Managers are thinking execution. Leaders are inspiring people. Managers are driving people's success. Leaders are looking to the future. Managers are working in the present. Leaders are shaping culture. Managers are endorsing culture, meaning you're promoting it, you're aligned with it, you're making sure it continues to thrive. Leaders solidify expectations. Managers have controls in place, right? So the leader says we need to have high expectations. We need to be proud of what we do. We have to do it right. The manager is saying, here's what we need to do to make sure that we do it right, right? So those are the distinguishing factors. If you're trying to, figure out whether you're more of a leader or more of a manager, those diagrams and those functions should let you know what direction your own behavior and your own execution is pointing in. So what happens when managers fail to lead? What happens when managers don't realize that there's a leadership component of what they should be doing? So this is what happens when they're not thriving in that space, is they're not asking questions to invite team member input, right? So inviting team member input really is you being a leader. They're not encouraging team member engagement. If you're not bringing your teams together, including those teams that you partner with, there's a lapse of leadership there. They're neglecting team member safety, and that's physically and psychologically, right? When somebody feels psychologically safe, they're not scared to share. They're not scared to challenge. They're not scared to question. They don't set the stage for team members. So they don't make sure that team members are aware, that they know what they should be doing, that they know what's coming, right? If you're in an environment where you get a lot of surprises and you don't know what the right hand is doing from the left, that's a leadership failure in the environment and in culture. They don't create transparency. So that really means we're not operating it honestly. We're not talking about problems openly. We're not providing constructive criticism. When they're not advocating for their teams, the manager no longer cares, right? What's happening for that could happen for many reasons in an environment, but it's stopped, right? So that's a failure in leadership. They provide team members with inconsistent messaging and communication. So as leaders, it's your priority to make sure that everything is aligned in terms of the messaging and the goals and the direction we're all moving in. When that's not happening and people don't know what those things are, it's a failure in leadership. They are disorganized. They're misplaced accountability. So misplaced accountability means it's really the leader's fault, but they're blaming everybody else, right? And so that happens too, and that's a failure in leadership. Or when unrealistic expectations are set, there has to be a degree of awareness and responsibility from a leadership perspective to understand what's a realistic goal and what isn't. Because when you push people to or towards unrealistic goals, you're setting them up to fail from the beginning. So it's up to the leadership and the leader in you to recognize, is this doable? Why or why not? And the leader in you needs to break it down. And then if it's not realistic, you have to speak up about it, right? That's the leadership move. It's taking that extra step. Any comments on the managers failing to lead, Marisa?
Take this slide and turn it around, right? And that's how you are successful as a manager.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and these are things that we live through in commonplace on a daily basis. So reality is that management plus leadership will equal effective management. And it's because you're combining these functional, transactional aspects of management, and you're combining it with the people part. And you can't manage successfully as long as people are involved. You can't do it successfully without the leadership part. We're lying to ourselves if we tell ourselves that that's doable. It's not. It's not enough to be transactional. It's not enough to be great at project management. It's not enough in management as long as people are involved. Okay, so why do managers hesitate then? So this is the reason that I see hesitation take place very commonly. Over the past 2 decades, it's been prevalent. It's fear. Managers are afraid to lead, and that could be a symptom of culture, or it could be a symptom of development and training that's needed. There's bureaucracy. There's people who are dominant in the environment and are wanting it a certain way and are refusing to adapt or change, or are not open to a healthy environment for whatever reason. There's risk of conflict. People feel like they're going to get into an argument, or there's going to be some conflict that they can't manage or just don't want to deal with. Lack of self-awareness. Managers may not know that they're not leading. They may think that they are, but because they haven't been properly trained, that self-awareness may not be there. And misconceptions. Misconceptions, like we talked about at the beginning, where people feel like they need permission to lead, or like leadership is about the role that they're in, which is absolutely not true. Anything to add there, Marisa, before I move on?
No, it's all good. I think the risk of conflict is the one I see the most, right? People are just, they're not only afraid to step into their role, they just don't like conflict.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, the more you work on it, the better you get at it. So don't avoid it.
Yeah. And the reality is that if there's going to be conflict, avoiding it isn't going to prevent it. So there's a couple of that's another, I think, misconception in the workplace, that avoiding it is preventing it. Preventing it is handling things the right way before it gets there. So, another lesson for another session, but these are the things that create effectiveness in management versus just managing and trying to push through it. Management can be a lot easier if you know how to navigate, and that's why training and development is so important. So emotional intelligence. So as we've learned already, these 5 functions of leadership really speak to the humanity in the workplace, is what leadership is. And so emotional intelligence is at the inception of leadership. All 5 functions of leadership require emotional intelligence to be realized effectively. So you have to work on those skills that make up emotional intelligence to really be a strong leader. Technical skills can help secure a position, but emotional intelligence is what helps managers retain their positions and scale the ladder. So if you're looking to grow, if you're looking to get promoted, if you just want to be more effective as a manager and as an individual, because all of these things translate over to personal livelihood as well. You have to acknowledge that this is important. Emotional intelligence helps managers successfully coach teams, manage stress, deliver feedback, and collaborate with others. So those are the things that emotional intelligence really impacts in the workplace. Emotional intelligence is typically described as having interpersonal skills in the workplace. So the reason I included that is because we'll see that on job descriptions and job ads, and I seldom see it explained. Right? So we ask for interpersonal skills, but really what we're asking for is a high degree of emotional intelligence and leadership. But because people aren't familiar with what that really means, I think that people then don't realize that part of stepping into their role requires them to continue working on these areas.
Yeah, I love the backdrop of this slide, right? It's a bunch of puzzle pieces put together because that's what it takes to be really good at managing teams, because managers are pulled in so many different directions. So very cool there, Dr. Myra.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, I agree. And you know what? At the end of the day, we're all part of the puzzle. We're all part of this end image that we're trying to form, and seeing it that way really helps you acknowledge each piece of that puzzle. So these are the 4 components of emotional intelligence. So these are the areas you want to work on as a manager to become a stronger leader. Overall, I'll tell you, all of your relationships will benefit if you work on these things, because you'll just be more effective at things that as human beings we need to be successful. Self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. So these are the things that if you want to really encompass and step into your leadership as a manager, these are the areas that you should really focus on when it comes to emotional intelligence. Okay, so our key takeaways for today are these. Leadership is not a noun, it is a verb. All team members can be leaders. Managers and executive leaders have a responsibility to lead in their roles, and that is typically outlined in their job descriptions. So if you're a manager or if you're an executive, pay attention, because you are being required to step into it. Everybody can be a leader, but you do have a requirement within the scope of your role. So it's important to step into it, develop it, identify your strengths and weaknesses. We all have them. Nobody's perfect, but it's about gaining balance. It's about gaining ground, not perfection. There are 5 functions that bring leadership to life in the workplace, and those are influencing, motivating, inspiring, creating, and mentoring. Mentoring is my favorite one, by the way. There are common reasons why managers hesitate to lead. Identify what is holding you back and push forward. So you've now gotten familiar with some of the things that are commonly derailers or hold people back when it comes to leadership. Identify what's holding you back personally if you're not thriving in these 5 areas. You need to develop emotional intelligence to fully realize your leadership. There are 4 components of emotional intelligence, and those are self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. And then last, but certainly not least, management plus leadership is effective management. Okay, they're partners, and you need it as long as you're working with people. Okay, all right,
Awesome.
Marisa, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, I have a question for you,
Yeah.
Dr. Myra. I mean, maybe it's more of a statement, but I love the fact that you say, we're not looking for perfection, we're looking for growth, right? And so our teams out there, if you're looking for growth, management cues can help. And talk to your managers, talk to your leaders, share with them what you're learning and what you're experiencing in these webinars, because there's a lot of content in the 30 minutes that you're getting from Dr. Myra. So thank you. Dr. Myra, I'm going to wrap us up today.
We have a question in the chat. So it says, thank you for your informative and effective session. I will participate again for further topics. Thank you, Anja. We appreciate you. We do have 3 more sessions as part of this series. And then we have others. So if you want to check out what we have, you can go to our website, to our events tab at www.managementcues.org, or you could look us up on Eventbrite. We have all of our events there as well. Some are free, some are longer, more disciplined training sessions for you guys, but feel free to ask us questions anytime. We love your feedback and your participation is appreciated. All right, back to you, Marisa.
So as we conclude today's session, I strongly encourage those of you listening in to take the insights you've gained and apply them in your professional journey. I would also suggest you could apply them in your personal journey. The recording of this particular webinar and the deck and a surprise or two will be emailed to all participants. If you're interested in previous webinars, please just let us know. You can find additional resources, including management planners and other tools to support your ongoing development at managementcues.org. Of course, we'll continue the Art of Effective Management series next Wednesday, March 13th at 10 a.m. Pacific. Feel free to connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn to stay updated on future events or to submit your questions or to share some feedback. Thank you all for being part of the Art of Effective Management series. We look forward to seeing you again next week. Take care.